Hi, my name is Sydney, and today I'm going to be talking to you guys about bees. So, what do we know about bees? Usually, what people think of when they think about bees is that they're just little bugs that are outside that sting you or that make honey. So, there are actually 20,000 known species of bees, but in South Carolina we have three main types. We have the honeybee, the bumblebee, and the carpenter bee. So you can see the differences in what they look like. The honeybee is a little bit smaller, a little bit more stripy than the other ones. The bumblebee is round and fluffy, and the carpenter bee is pretty big and a little bit darker with its color. So today, I'm mostly going to be talking about honeybees to you guys. I'm actually a beekeeper, so I have a lot of experience with honeybees specifically because those are the bees that beekeepers take care of. So what do honeybees make? They make honey, beeswax, and propolis. So, honey. Honeybees will collect nectar from flowers and they store it in their second stomach. When a honeybee goes home to the hive, it passes the nectar to another bee by regurgitating the liquid into another bee's mouth. So it's kind of gross. This process is repeated until the nectar is finally spit into a honeycomb cell. When it's put into the cell, it's still pretty runny, nothing like the thick honey that you use at the breakfast table. To get all that extra water out of their honey, bees set to work fanning the honeycomb with their wings to speed up the thickening process. When the honey is ready, a bee seals the comb with a layer of wax. Away from air and water, honey can be stored for a very long time, giving bees the perfect food for cold winter months. So, honey actually can never go bad. Because of the way they make it, they have a lot of their stomach acids and enzymes and stuff in it. So you can actually find honey that's from thousands and thousands of years ago in Egypt that is still perfectly okay to eat. So we can see here, this is some honeycomb that these bees have drawn out. You can see that there's some honey right here that has been capped, so this thin layer of wax on top. And then you can even see over here, there's a little bit of honey that's probably still too runny that they haven't covered yet. So underneath all this wax is some nice, fresh honey. Next, bees make beeswax. Worker bees' bodies change the sugar of the honey into wax when they eat it, which ends up making little flakes of wax on their underside. Workers chew these pieces of wax until they become soft and easy to shape, and then they add the chewed wax to the honeycomb. They make hexagon-shaped cells, which are used to store honey, nectar, and pollen, and for the queen to lay her eggs in. People use beeswax in many things, like lotions, makeup, candles, and even crayons. So you can see here, it's very interesting, you can see the little flakes that are coming off of the worker bee. You see all these little flakes coming out of their abdomen. And so they'll take these and chew them up and build their honeycomb with it. And it takes a lot of bees to make all the honeycomb that you're seeing in these hives. So it's pretty cool. Next, they make propolis. Now, not a lot of people know what propolis is. So the honeybees make propolis from tree resins that they get from leaf buds and tree sap. Worker bees collect these and carry them back to the hive on their legs. The bees mix the resins with wax and honey and turn it into propolis. They use this to seal up any open cracks or areas in their hive that they don't want. It is also used to keep and prevent any bacteria from being brought into the hive by mice and other pests. So you can see here, all this orange stuff right here and all this stuff that's on this wood of the hive, all this is propolis. So they use this to seal the hive up. So when beekeepers open up their hives to check on their bees, they'll actually have to use a special tool and pop open the lid and scrape it up so they can open it because it's really sticky. Some people even call it bee glue. So, inside a honeybee colony, how does it work? How do the bees get along? So, about 20,000 to 80,000 honeybees make up one colony. Beekeepers like to think of a colony as one big organism because of the way honeybees work together. There are three types of bees: the queen, worker bees, and drones. What's the difference between them? So, a worker bee. Their job changes depending on their age. They make up about 95% of the hive, and all of those bees are going to be females. Then there's the queen bee. She is the mother of the hive. She lays up to about 2,000 eggs a day. There's only one queen in a colony. And then there's the drone. Their purpose is to mate. They only make up about 5% of the hive's population. So you can see the differences in their size. This worker bee is pretty small. She's a lot smaller than the other ones. And then this queen bee is super, super long and a little bit fatter than the other bees because she has to store all their eggs in her abdomen. And then here you can see the drone bee. It has really big eyes, and he actually doesn't have a stinger. So worker bees, like I said, their job changes depending on how old they are. So when they're 1 to 2 days old, they have the job to clean the cells, and they start with the one they were born in. They also help keep the eggs warm. When they're 3 to 5 days old, their job is to feed older larvae. 6 to 11 days old, they have the responsibility to feed the youngest larvae. 12 to 17 days old, they're producing wax, carrying food, building comb, and keeping the hive clean. And then 18 to 21 days, they are protecting the hive entrance from other bees and insects and have guard duty. From 22 days to the end of their life, which is about 40 to 45 days, they fly from the hive, collect pollen, nectar, and water, and bring it back for the others. So here we can actually see the inside of a hive. Here is all brood. So this is their eggs that are covered, and they're about ready to hatch. So the queen lays her eggs, and then they take care of the little larva until a couple days before they hatch, and then they're in here. So here's some younger larvae, and then here's some of the older stuff that's about ready. And then here you can see that they've stored pollen in these cells. You can even see the different colors of pollen because certain plants have darker pollen than others. And then here you can see a little bit of nectar that they've stored in these comb. So then the queen bee, she's going to be the largest bee in a colony and has many important jobs in the hive. The queen is responsible for laying a constant supply of eggs to keep the hive's population high. In a good year, a queen may lay as many as 200,000 eggs, which is a lot of eggs. The queen also produces chemicals called pheromones, which is a type of smell, that control and organize many of the behaviors of her colony. Each queen has her own unique pheromone, which allows her colony to recognize her, defend her, and meet her needs to keep the hive safe and strong. So beekeeping. You guys may have seen before people, wearing the big white suits and the veils over their heads. So what does a beekeeper do? The main goal of a beekeeper is to keep their hive healthy and happy. They do this by checking on their bees. When they do these checkups, they have a few specific things to look for. Is there enough honey for them to eat? Are they bringing in enough pollen? Are there pests inside the hive? And is the queen healthy and laying eggs? So here we can see some beehives. So these are what beekeepers usually use to keep honeybees. So you'll be able to see different boxes. As you get more and more bees, you'll add more and more boxes on top. So the hive is made up of a few different parts. So there's a bottom board, which just keeps stuff from getting in on the bottom. There's a brood box, which is where the queen will lay all her eggs. There's a honey super, which is where they store most of their honey. There's an inner cover and a telescoping cover. And then at the bottom right here, there's a little entrance. So most beekeepers have a brood box, a honey super, and then the lid. And they can get bigger and bigger and bigger the more bees you get. And then inside the boxes, there are these things right here, which are called frames. And so on these frames, the honeybees will build all their comb out so they can store all their stuff. And it's super easy for a beekeeper to check up on their bees. All they have to do is pull a frame out and look at it. So after they check on the bees, what do? What's the point? So when a beekeeper checks on their hive, they will take note of any issues and try to fix them. So if the hive doesn't have enough honey, they will feed them sugar water. Or if they see a lot of pests inside the hive, like hive beetles or ants, they will put traps and treatments to get rid of them. Eventually, if the colony is doing well, the beekeeper can take any extra honey from the hive. So, this is what it looks like when you take honey out of the hive. So when you're trying to get all the honey out of the frames, what you can do is you're going to have to cut all the little wax coverings off of the frame. So here this person is using a heated knife and just slowly slicing through all that beeswax to get to all the honey inside. And then you put it through a strainer to get all the little wax pieces out and any little bits of pollen or something that may have gotten stuck in there. And then there are a few different ways you can take your honey. Usually people will just scrape all their honey out and let it drip out, but that takes a really long time because honey is super thick. So there are these special machines that people use called extractors. And so you'll put a frame in there and it'll spin it around super, super quickly and then spit it out. And then you have all this honey that can strain, get all the extra beeswax out, and then you've got a bunch of really good honey. So one of the most important things that bees do is pollinate. So let's learn a bit more about bees and pollination. What do bees pollinate? More than 1/3 of the crops in the world are pollinated by honeybees and other bee species. Here are some plants that depend on bees to be pollinated. As you can see, that's a lot of different plants, lots of vegetables and berries and nuts. So without bees, a lot of these wouldn't be able to be pollinated as well. So how do the bees pollinate? So when honeybees go around to flowers to collect nectar, they will also collect pollen. After the bee visits a flower, she begins grooming herself and pushes the pollen that is on her body down toward her hind legs and packs the pollen into her pollen basket. A little nectar mixed with the pollen keeps it all together, and the hairs in the pollen basket will hold it in place. Any pollen that doesn't get collected in her basket will get carried to other flowers that she visits, and when she lands, it'll get dusted off. Through this process, one honeybee can pollinate up to 5,000 plants in a day. So, one very important thing is that bees will usually pick one plant a day to pollinate. So if I was a bee and I wanted to pollinate just sunflowers, then that's all I would do that day. So if I was a bee and I could only find 3 sunflowers, I would only go to 3 sunflowers because they like to do one different plant a day. So here we can see different bees. These are actually pictures of my beehives. So you can see all the little pollen in their baskets. You can see on their legs all this pollen that's stored up and collected. And bees really like pollen because it has a lot of protein, and so they eat it. And they'll actually mix it together with honey and a little bit of their stomach acid and store it for a while, and then it'll ferment, and then it makes bee bread, which is super nutritious for them, and everybody calls it bee bread because it looks kind of like bread. So, why are bees so important? Everybody talks about how we should protect the bees and how they're endangered. So what do we need? So why are they so important? We may think of them as annoying bugs, but bees are actually vital to our food and environment. Without bees, we wouldn't have many of the fruits and vegetables we have now, and many food webs and ecosystems would be disrupted. Sadly, in the last few years, bee populations have been declining quickly. So what can we do to help? We can use some of what we've learned today to help slow down the bees' population decline. Here are some ideas. Find flowers and other plants that bees like to pollinate and plant a bee-friendly garden. Make a bee bath. Fill a shallow bird bath or small dish or bowl with clean water and arrange pebbles and stones inside so they poke out of the water. The bees will land on the stones and pebbles and drink the water as they take a break from foraging and pollinating. You can buy honey from local beekeepers. This is especially helpful because beekeeping equipment can sometimes be pretty expensive. And so if you can buy their honey, their fresh local honey, you will be able to help them take care of the beehives better. You could even start beekeeping too. If you were really interested in bees, you could find somewhere and learn about beekeeping more and even start your own hives. It's super fun. And then the last thing that we can do, which is always super easy, is to share our knowledge. If we make sure that we tell people about bees and how important they are and what we can do to help them, then we can protect our special friends, the bees.